Question. What happened to all the Westerns? I mean, for decades in Hollywood, it seemed most of the movies that were shot in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all these Westerns. It's like, I would think one of my grandfathers, whenever he had a movie on it was like always a Western. He'd watch movies from his time, Westerns. I could never get into that. But for decades, that was the thing. Specifically, men and boys watched Westerns. And now, Westerns don't really exist in cinema. Hardly any Westerns are produced in American cinema anymore. No one watches them. The reason they're not being produced is because no one watches new Westerns. And if they do, it's the exception to the rule. But they haven't truly disappeared. Because in theory, Westerns still exist. And as I probably will put in the title of this video, superhero movies have taken their place. So let's talk about that transition, how that's happened. Because we all know superhero movies / Star Wars ultimately are what are bringing in the millions of dollars. And anything beyond Star Wars or a comic book based movie on a superhero, anything beyond that is much more of a gamble for these studios. So they keep pumping these out, supply and demand. But what's the connection there? How do we say that a Western, and when we think of Western, we're thinking of something that was probably filmed out in like Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, one of those states. And what do you imagine? You imagine that there's all these outlaws there, and there's not really there's not a police force. I mean, there may be a sheriff, but ultimately in walks the Cowboys hero to provide some stability in this town. So the cowboy saves the day, not law enforcement as we know it, not the local law enforcement. Whether they exist or not doesn't really matter to the movie. All that matters is someone more powerful walked into this town and they could only be saved by this other outsider, the hero. There's your Western. There's no law and order. Here comes the chaos, and then here comes the hero. And typically the hero wins. That's what superhero movies used to be back when they were just Westerns. Now it's changed. It's funny because when you look at Marvel movies, for example, where are the cops? Where are the policemen? Where's the military that's here to take care of us? Well, they may be in it. I mean, I understand, like, even with Iron Man, the military is a big part of the concept of it. But ultimately, they are catering to the superheroes in the movie. They're working alongside them, helping them. But we're not depending on our military to save the day. We're not depending on policemen to save the day. We're depending on our superheroes to save the day. Because typically the villains in Marvel movies are beyond just normal humans. Obviously, so much in the Marvel universe coincides with Thor, and we're like with Loki with the first Avengers movie. You've got people from beyond this planet even, and they're the real threat, and it's going to take a superhero, or at least maybe the villain is a human, but they've got these superhuman powers that will be matched to the superhero. So yeah, that's what happened to these Wild West gunslinging movies. They're not relevant anymore. But it's interesting because when you think about when these comics came out, because it was Batman and Superman, I think, came out around 38, 39. I mean, so many of these superheroes were coming out around the time that the Wild Western movies were popular. But once that ran its course, and now that we've had these superheroes for decades now from the source material, we've got enough source material to last several more decades to keep making these superhero movies. So what is a Western? A Western is ultimately, there is no law and order, or if there is, it's not worth even mentioning. They need someone bigger than themselves to save the day. In walks the hero to battle the chaos. That's what superhero movies are. It's just now there's this immediate nostalgia to it because so many of these comic book characters have been around ultimately as long as Westerns. But now that we have the technology, and now that we've got Disney basically in charge of the whole thing to distribute it for us globally, we have the perfect modern day Western. Your comments belong right here.